Are you looking to add the Froggy Pose to your portfolio, but you cannot seem to get the composite right in the computer? Well, I'm going to share my screen with you today and walk you through step by step how I do my composites for the Froggy Pose. Plus, you get to get your hands on all of my free Photoshop actions. Hi, I'm Michelle Brewster, founder of the Swaddle Pro and the Profitable Studio, and I am here to help you conquer all things maternity and newborn photography by bringing you the tools and systems that you need to have a long-term successful studio. So be sure to subscribe. Here we are in Photoshop with our Froggy Pose composite that we're going to be putting together. So here's the image with the parent holding the top of the head and then the bottom underneath. Now with this one, we might have to actually do a little bit more maneuvering because as we switched from holding the head to holding the hands, he wiggled a bit and he kind of fell into his hands a little bit here. But I'm going to show you how to still be able to use these perfectly together to create a beautiful final image that no one will ever be able to tell that you had assistance with. So from here, what we're going to do first is I always choose my top of piece of the head to pull over to the other image. Very rarely do I take the bottom half because there's so many more details and textures and whatnot that I need to work with that I know from the way that I photograph that my background is usually blurred and I don't have to worry about anything else that's going on in the bottom of the image. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to separate these two images. I'm going to make this one a little bit smaller. I first use my lasso tool at 5 pixels. I'm going to do a quick lasso. I like to make it messy. I feel like the messier I do things when it comes to lassos or erasing or a bunch of things I'm going to show you, the more natural I feel it comes out. So I go right across the forehead, right down, and again, just really messy, no rhyme or reason to it. Good. From here, I choose the move tool and I simply just pull it over. We're going to line it up the best that we can right now. So as you can see, this background image, I was a little bit closer. So for this foreground image right here, foreground layer, the baby was smaller, so the head's not lining up well. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to change the opacity of this layer down to 50% so that I can see the layer behind to match up the size of the head the best that I can. So I'm going to just start to adjust it. Try and get it to line up perfectly. Now I'm going to turn the opacity back up, see where it's taken us. We need to go up a bit higher so we can see that hairline. I have to twist the head a little bit, like so. Make it bigger again. And it's a lot of just like tweaking it back and forth until you feel like it's getting to the correct size and shape. Now, this particular baby, he actually has a lump on the top of his head here. So he has a regular round shape on this side, and he's got a bit of a bump over here from being stuck in that wonderful birth canal. So we're going to adjust this a little bit within our Liquify tool. So I'm not concerned about the fact that his head looks a little bit lopsided right now because that's actually the way that it is in real life. So from here, I'm pretty happy with the way that this is lined up right on this side here and this side here. So I'm going to choose my eraser and then I'm simply going to erase his forehead at 100% right until I feel like I've got it at a spot where it looks natural. I don't have a huge contrast from one layer to the other. This looks pretty good right here. So I'm going to see what it looks like just by erasing a little bit of his fuzz. No. So we'll keep it like this. I'm going to go back to my move tool. Make my image a little bit smaller so I can see the edges. Make this a bit bigger again on this side. And turn it on and off so I can adjust and see. Okay, so we need to still come up more. There we go. it up again. Zoom in, turn the layer on and off, much closer. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to go back to the erase tool and I'm just going to go around the edges a bit more, just making sure that I've got all of the layer working properly to be able to make it look like one smooth image. So I don't see anything on his forehead that makes me think that this is two photographs that have been put together. I do, however, see it on the backdrop here, which we'll take care of in just a second. So I'm going to bring my image back to 100%. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to erase at 30% this line that you can see right here. So that will allow me to get it as close as I can. And then if I still see any difference in the like texture or the detail of it, I can then go with my patch tool and make it perfect. But we're pretty good here. So as you can see, it's already a huge difference and we haven't done much. There's with the hand, without the hand. So there's not a ton that we're going to have to do besides fixing this little bump here on his head. So right now, I'm already in a place that I'm comfortable with flattening this into one layer. So I'm going to come over to the sandwich over here and select flatten image, and I'm going to move on. Now, I'm going to be using the Profitable Studio action set today. You can find a link to it. It's a free action set that I have on the website. So the link is going to be in the description below, so you can go ahead and instantly download it and start using this. But I see a bit of a shadow up here this is from my PVC frame that goes around my beanbag. So I just want to be able to fix this a little bit. So I'm going to select this action called Paint in Bright. Anytime that there are directions that go with the action set, they'll pop up here. I'm going to turn the opacity of this down to 20%, and I'm going to make my brush smaller so that I can come over just to that area. So this looks pretty good. And now I'm just going to quickly go over, and it's pretty close. Good enough for right now. So I'm going to flatten this again. I'm going to use my patch tool at this point just to drag messy circle around in case there's anything else and completely get rid of it. Perfect. Okay, so now before I start messing with the sharpness or I try and make the skin any softer, I'm definitely going to fix that bump on his head right here. So we're going to go up to Filter, Liquify. We're going to use the top option here for Warp Tool. I'm going to come over. I want to make sure my brush is relatively big so that I can kind of work with the whole space all at once. And I'm just going to do tiny, tiny, tiny little movements. There's not much that needs to go in. So that's pretty good right there. So as you can see, I'll turn it on and off, before, after. Okay, perfect. So at this point now, I'm going to zoom into the skin and get rid of any blemishes. So as you can see, he's got a tiny bit of baby acne. He actually has pretty gorgeous skin. So I'm just going to use my patch tool that I already have open to just quickly get rid of these little baby acne pieces here. Not much at all. Super quickly. Now, I'm not one to completely get rid. So a lot of the times you'll see like the white little bumps on their nose, but you'll see a ton of them. I will not get rid of all of that because that is something that I feel like almost puts a timestamp on them. It's just like the cord, yeah, it may not be the prettiest, but it lets you remember that they were actually that brand new. So my edits are very simple. I want to still be able to see the texture in their skin. I don't want anything. I still want to be able to see the texture in their skin. I don't want any of my photographs to ever look like the baby skin is plastic. I like being able to see their pores, to see, any little pieces of like skin that are peeling. If they're really big, yes, of course, I'll get rid of them. But again, I feel like that timestamp it, and it really sets you back to that time when they were so brand new when you're looking at them. So I like to see all of that. Okay, so I'm just gonna smooth around the eyes just a little bit. And that should be good. He's got a little mark here on his arm. That little redness right here. Go by. Perfect. Okay, so now at this point, I'm going to sharpen. So I'm going to pop over here and choose the sharpen action. And what this one does is it allows you to paint it on the skin in the areas that you want to. So again, directions will pop up. And what you get to do is choose the opacity. I recommend starting at 30%. Make your brush nice and small because you really want to be intentional on where you put it. So I like to just make sure the eyelashes are nice and sharp, the nose, definitely those gorgeous little lips of his. And then sometimes I'll even just come up to the hair. Like he has great hair. So I'll just do a little bit of his hair just to really bring that out in detail. So it is minute, but if you look at his eyes, there's before and after. And you can always dial up and down the opacity if you want more or less, but 30% is typically a good spot to go with. So now I'm going to flatten it again. And I'm going to start messing with his skin tone a little bit because I do see a little bit of a magenta hue in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to the masks here and choose selective color. Selective color is one of my favorite to be able to use because it's very simple it automatically defaults on red here and then take out the magenta really quickly and easily. And it does a fantastic job. I don't mess around with a ton of crazy actions, a ton of like really intricate Photoshop details because they're time consuming. I want to be in and out of Photoshop as quickly as I can, but still create beautiful images. So as you can see, it took out a great amount of that magenta tone. Still looks really natural. Love it. Okay, so we're going to flatten this. I'm going to bring it up to 100% again. Now, the other thing that I notice here is, yes, he is on a blue curly wool filler here, but my backdrop is white. Unfortunately, it's got some blue casts in it, and I want to take that out. So in a situation like this where there's so much white and just blue here, I can't just take out all the blue or else it's going to get rid of the color in this. So what I do is I'm going to create a duplicate layer. I'm going to go to Hue Saturate up here under Images. I'm going to choose any color other than blue. Select where I want, because some of this I think might even have some cyan in it too. So I use the eyedropper to select what color it's actually seeing. And then I'm going to take the saturation down. So as you can see, the backdrop now looks fantastic, but the curly wool layer that he's on does not. But at least it's gotten my backdrop the way that I want it to. So now all I'm going to simply do is choose the eraser tool, and I'm just going to erase that part. Make sure I'm at 100% opacity. And here we go. Rather than trying to lasso the background perfectly and then just select the area that I want to desaturate for those colors, this scene is mainly white with just minimal blue details from this little filler here. So it's easier for me to just desaturate the whole thing and erase this in, and I'm done. So we've got that perfect now. I'm going to flatten this again. And now at this point, I want to soften the baby's skin. So one of my favorite actions here is the powder press. It really works absolutely amazing on beautiful skin to create that powder press, almost like porcelain doll look, but without getting rid of the baby's texture of their skin and all of their little features. So I'm going to select this action. It's going to give you directions. And the same thing with this one, I want to zoom in so I can really see them clearly. I want my brush to be small and I want to be at 30% opacity so that I can go over the areas that I want. So with this particular one, because it does soften, you really want to be careful not to then go over the eyelashes, the nostrils, and the lips where you just sharpened a little while ago. So from here, I'm going to be really careful. Now, you probably are going to be like, I don't see any difference while you're doing this, Michelle. But I'm going to show you afterwards when I turn on and off this layer, and you would be really surprised to see how much of a difference it actually makes. So it's really great for babies that have a lot of like frown lines, if they're giving you that little grumpy look when they're in this pose. If you have even just some shadows that you really want to be able to soften just a little bit, this is really great for that. So I will keep my brush relatively small when I'm going around the areas of the mouth, the nose, and the eyes. And then after that, I will open my brush up pretty big so that I can move quickly. Because then again, you can just really messily, like I want to do this quick in and out. And the more messy that I do it, the actually more natural it looks. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to turn on and off this layer. So this was before and after. Before, after. So you can see it just gives such a beautiful skin texture. So now I'm going to flatten this, go back up to 100%, and we're pretty close. There's only a couple more things that I would actually do to this photograph to make it perfect. So I do see still a little bit of magenta on the shadow side of the subject. So I'm going to go over and choose Image, Adjustment, and Color Balance. And I'm going to choose the shadows, and I'm going to add a little bit of green into the shadows just to get rid of some of that magenta. And then from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to crop this image in a little bit closer. I tend to leave my images wide because most of my clients purchase large wall art. And I know that most of my clients end up choosing a canvas gallery wrap. So I like to keep my images wider so that I don't have to then extend the edges to be able to wrap. But for this one, to make this image just perfect and beautiful, I want to show you how the final one should be. So I'm going to crop a little bit closer. So we're going to bring in to about here. Perfect. Great. So now my particular style, I do this with almost every single one of my newborn images because I love to soften the edges. I want to create a vignette that gives a really soft feel around the edges that then makes the people who are looking at your photograph focus on the subject and bring their eye into the center. So I simply do this by choosing the lasso tool. I turn the feather all the way up to 250 pixels. And then again, really messy. I just circle around, no rhyme or reason to it. So now I want to invert this lasso. So now you can see the outer edges are being selected. I edit, copy, edit, paste. So now let's put it on a separate layer that you can see over here on your layer palette. So from this point on, I now add a Gaussian blur to it to soften the edge. So I go up to Filter, Blur, Gaussian blur, and I keep my Gaussian blur at about 250-ish pixels. So it gives it that nice soft effect around the edge. And from here, so I'll turn it on and off. So before, after, and now I have the ability to use my eraser to just simply erase any of the Gaussian blur that went over his head and on some of the filler. So we're going to flatten this again. And the last final thing that I do to every single one of my images is always to add a nice subtle pop to it. So I know beforehand that I always want to make sure that there's detail in my highlight side and my shadow side, especially because when I add a pop to it, I don't want to lose any highlights or have the shadows get so dark that I can't see the texture of their skin. So this is a pretty even photograph. So now at this point, I want to add a little pop. So I'm going to come over here to the subtle pop action. And you can see it just really brings it to life. So the one great thing about this action is or any of the actions, but this one in particular is completely adjustable. So when you come over to the layer palette here, you'll see the group folder for it. You just choose the little drop down arrow, and there are all these options in here that you can play around with. So for example, this bottom one here within that folder is called Bright and Pop.
Now, if you see, I turn it on off, there's a big difference. So if you feel like now the highlight side of him is too bright, all you need to do is simply select that layer and turn your opacity down a bit. See, and that brings it back beautifully. So I am completely thrilled with the way this looks. So I'm going to flatten it all together. And that's my final image. That's how we took it from a composite to an image that no one would ever know in the end that it was two photographs that you put together. It's a beautiful way to create some stunning eye-dropping images. I hope this really helped. If you enjoyed this, please give me a thumbs up and a like here, and definitely let me know if you have any questions in the comments below.